Morning. Thank you. The work that I'm presenting here this week involves the mapping of the energy release during the earthquake. And so when you have a big earthquake like this one, it doesn't just happen in a single point, but rather the energy happens over a very big area. And our particular work on studying the energy release, we use the data that were recorded in North America. Okay, so each one of these dots is a little seismometer, and the seismometers are uniform and they're installed in a similar manner from site to site. And so what we have essentially is a big antenna that we can use to focus the seismic energy back towards the source. And you can see if we look at the overlay of all the seismograms, right there, that you can see how similar. The only difference really in all these waves is that they're shifted in time. But if you account for that time shift, you can get them to line up very well, and basically we can use the array as an antenna. And here's basically our result from back projecting these data. What I'm showing is an animation, and this is actually the rupture propagation. Okay, so the earthquake starts at the epicenter, and then if you look at the energy, how it moves out, it moved down dip to the west, and it moved a little bit to the north, and then it ends up moving back down towards the south. And so this, again, was made possible basically by this big array that exists in North America. Okay, and really the interesting thing that we found is when we looked at our map of where the energy was distributed for this earthquake, it was different than our colleagues' map. And so if you look on the right, you can see the map of what we call slip, which is basically the relative motion across the fault plane, and that's more indicative of smooth sliding and longer period energy. Okay, so our technique, the one that's shown on the left, is more representative of the short period, higher pitched energy. And so it's pretty interesting that we see a big disconnect. And so, you know, there's a lot on this slide, but the basic point is that the two colors don't really overlap. Okay, so you can see that most of the slip from most of the slip here is in this big pink region. Here's the epicenter, and then here's our results, this sort of short period radiation. And we think this was happening at the plate interface, which has a depth of maybe 40 or 50 kilometers at this position. So this was very shallow. This is what led to the tsunami, as you heard in the previous presentation. And this energy, we think, is what caused a lot of the ground shaking that was over here, some of the strong accelerations that were on the coast. And just to make an analogy, and it's not perfect, but what our model is sort of presenting here is that the energy partitioning, the energy that was released by this earthquake, it was sort of geographically separated by frequency or by period. So just like when you have an orchestra and you have maybe the lower pitched and the deeper tones in one area, maybe the tubas and the basses, that would be the energy. So these guys here might be equivalent to the slip, and then the energy that we image down here would be in a different geographical spot, so sort of like the flutes or the clarinets or whatever. And it's not a perfect analogy, but it's the same idea that just like the sounds have pitch, you can basically image different frequency content in the source properties. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, do we have any questions? And please, when you ask questions and also when you answer them, please identify yourself, because I think we have some reporters on the phone.
Christina Reed, Discovery News. Keith, what was the time variation for the changes in the energy? How quickly were they going from one place to another?
Yeah, so the you can see the scale bar at the top. Let me see if I can get the movie to play again.
So the scale bar at the top.
You can see the energy. It takes place over about 3 minutes. Okay, and you can see the red line is moving across in time. And so you can see the energy originally moves west and then north. And now we're entering the second minute. And then you see it sort of propagates relatively rapidly down to the south. And so the whole thing is probably over in about 3 minutes. And that doesn't really sound like a lot of time, but for an earthquake, that's an enormous amount of time to go for 3 minutes.
Yeah, this is a question about the first presentation. How did you know that these high-velocity zones are seamounts as opposed to something else?
Well, this is a basic seismic topography, which shows the variation of seismic velocity. And one of the possibility is that the blue zone may represent a seamount, but there could be also compositional variations. One possibility is seamount. One possibility. There could be other possibilities.
Horst Rademacher, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. Question for Tsuji-san. You said you found fissures and ditches on the seafloor, and you have one indication that they were 1 to 3 meter wide. Do you know how deep they were?
It's very difficult. Yeah, it's very difficult to say the depth of the fissure, but it seems to be very deep. We look at this fissure from the window of the submersible. So actually this kind of things is collapsed from this kind of wall. So it's very, and from this kind, from in some place it's we cannot see the bottom of the fissures. So it's very easy to say this kind of width, but it's very difficult to say the depth.
The chain, is this a measurement chain or chain that we see there?
This one is actually we used this kind of mantle submersible and deep tow camera, two methods, and this one is a deep tow cameras. So to measure the height, the altitude of the deep tow camera, we used this kind of chain and to measure the scale.
I'm Dan Vergano with USA Today. This is a question for Dr. Koper. I'm wondering, could you talk about this displacement you observed in terms of other earthquakes? Is this just a phenomenon with this guy? Is it just happened because this was such a large earthquake? Does this happen lots of places? Or is it just the size of the displacement that's significant?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are looking into that, and there's been several recent giant earthquakes over the last 7 years. So 2004 Sumatra and the 2010 Chilean earthquake. And the short answer is yes, we do think it's a fundamental property of these mega thrust ruptures. That basically when the rupture extends over such a wide area, and basically when it goes in depth over such a wide range in depth, that the physical or the properties of the rupture are going to change. And we could be related to changes in fluid content, could be related to changes in mineralogy. So for instance, when you have the crust, the subducting crust in contact with sediment, or the subducting crust in contact with crust versus mantle, the change in material properties across the interface can have a big effect on the type of energy that's radiated. And I do have some colleagues, Thorn Lay is giving a talk, I think, later today. I think it's either the Gutenberg or the Lehman lecture, and he'll be talking more about this idea that we do see this along dip rupture segmentation, not just in this earthquake, but in these other giant megathrust earthquakes.
Do we have anyone on the telephone who'd like to ask a question? And please identify yourself, and the person who answers, please identify yourself.
Please identify yourself, and the person who answers, please identify yourself.
We can't, hold on a second, we can't understand you. Your phone is turned up too loud and it's repeating.
Your phone is turned up too loud and it's repeating. Your phone is turned up too loud and it's up too loud.
Okay, sorry about that. We can't get the telephone caller in. There's some feedback going on. Okay, so we'll move on. Are there any other questions here?
Rick Lovett again, freelance. The scarp, was that 100 and, how many meters was that? And was that formed entirely in this earthquake? Or is that an existing feature that's just been growing?
So your question is the...
Not the fissures, but the scarp that you found, the cliff.
Mm-hmm.
How is that something that was produced entirely by this earthquake? Or is it, right?
So this cliff, right? So here, so actually the displacement along the normal fault is the, actually there's offset. This green part is the continental crust. And this offset is very large, about 800 meters. So the earthquake frequently used this displacement plane. So it's not, how can I say that? Yeah, many earthquakes ruptured around this normal fault, and I don't know the period, but many times. And this kind of the big offset, large offset generate here and even in the seafloor. Yeah. So not only one time, the many earthquakes generate.
Okay, we're going to try again to get a question in from the telephone. If anyone's got a speakerphone on who's calling in, please turn off your speakerphone and just go through the regular phone. We'll give you 10 seconds to do that, and then we'll try to get in a question from the phones. Okay, do we have anybody who would like to ask a question from the telephone?
Okay, do we have anybody?
Okay, scratch that idea. Any other questions here on the floor?
Scratch that idea. Any other questions?
Okay, Josh.
Josh Fish from the Chronicle of Higher Education. For Suji, it's surprising that the rupture zone extending so far as it did produced the effects that you've diagrammed. That's my question.
Yes, sir.
Is that an unexpected result for you?
So, yeah. So your question is it's just my interpretation, but actually there's many other evidence to explain these mechanisms. For one of them is if the seafloor is flat, and the displacement is big. In such a case, there is no seafloor uplift. But in this part, the landward side of the normal fault, it's a very steep slope. So in such a case, if there is the horizontal displacement along the plate interface, so in such a case, there is a significant seafloor uplift. So so I think that this angle is also very important. So
Hi, I have a question from Rachel Berkowitz from Six today. And she wants to know, are there any seafloor sediment studies in the subduction zone that would provide info about prehistoric earthquakes in the
core sample.
Yes.
Yeah, previous one. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, yeah, we obtain the core samples here using now we obtain the only shallow core sample about 30 centimeter or something. But after the next April, we will drill in this region. It's IODP drilling and try to penetrate the plate interface near the trench. And before this earthquake, there's some drilling and core sample, but it's a little far from here. The northern side of the Japan trench, there is a ODP drilling cores. But yeah, it's far from this region. And yeah, core sample in this region will be obtained from now. So it's okay. So
So this is a question for the whole panel. What does this tell us about future? I mean, how do we put this into hazard prediction for the future? And how exactly did all this go about making an unusually large tsunami? And I understand it had like a double spike or something. Did I understand that correctly?
Probably already know is that it was unexpected. And the hazard maps for Japan actually have higher hazard to the south. And those maps are sort of based on recent seismicity and maybe historical seismicity. And what we found with this earthquake is that the records we have of previous earthquakes don't go back far enough to really give us a picture of where hazard might exist. So we were basically surprised that we could have a magnitude 9 in this spot because we hadn't had a record of a previous 9. There had been previous 8s maybe in this area, and the difference between an 8 and a 9 is enormous. And the reason the tsunami was so big was because of the massive slip in this earthquake, where you had slip of 60 or 70 meters. So I think in a hazard perspective, I think somebody alluded to this earlier. In my opinion, what we need to do is more of these paleoseismological investigations. This is where you dig trenches. You look for evidence of earthquakes that have happened in the last 10,000 years, before there were seismometers. And that can give you a better idea, or at least improve the picture of sort of recurrence intervals, or how likely it is to have this size of earthquake in a particular spot. And here it is challenging, because it was offshore, but there are these records of debris and sediment from previous tsunami that have been investigated in Japan, and I think there needs to be more work done along those lines.
I want to add one point, and most of the seismic hazard map are based on the past earthquakes. But our recent results show that it's really important to understand the physics, the reason why the earthquake occurred. So I think it's quite important to collect different information, such as the physical property of the rupture zone, so we can make a long-term prediction.
Actually, in Japan, there's another plate subduction zone, Nankai Trough. And even in the Nankai Trough, there is a mega spray fault branching from the plate interface. And before this mega earthquake, we believe the earthquake rupture propagated to the mega spray fault. But after this earthquake, we think we should consider about the rupture propagation to the trench. In the case of Nankai Trough, it's a trough axis. Before this earthquake, I explain again. Before this earthquake, there is a mega spray fault in the Nankai Trough. That mega spray fault is the reverse fault, but the rupture propagated to this. We thought the rupture propagated to this direction, but after this earthquake, we consider the rupture propagation to this direction. So in such a case, the tsunami should be become larger in this kind of the 2011 Tohoku earthquake. So now we are try to reveal around this region using the seismic data in the Nankai Trough.
Do we have any more questions? I guess not. So thank you very much for your presentations, and thanks everyone for being here. We're going to have another press conference at 9, about Kilauea volcano.